Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion. Only smart takes, never any clickbait. And today we're going to be discussing the Trent Williams contract situation. I'm going to lay it all out there and leave open-ended what the Niners should actually do in this situation. Discuss reports that the Niners are open to trading Ricky Pearsall and Renardo Green. What John Lynch had to say at the scouting combine in Indianapolis, and then we're going to go over the 49ers defensive roster per position group, discuss what some needs are, and which, if any, defensive free agents the Niners should look to bring back. So let's jump right in. As I'm sure you've seen or heard that there's a little bit of drama brewing with Trent Williams' contract. This is the last year that he's under contract, and it's just base salary. There's no guaranteed money. This happened a couple of years ago with Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey. The Niners redid the contracts, extended and increased their salary, which the latter part of that, the increasing the salary, I did not think was needed or warranted. But the value that Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey brings to the offense is obviously super high. And the players, especially players of that caliber, always have leverage when it comes to contract negotiations, unless the team is willing to part ways. And the headlines that we saw and the freakouts from people were around the thought that Trent Williams will be released if contract isn't worked out. Slow down, everybody. In the rush to be first, especially if you're on social media, you are just rushing to look stupid first. There is nothing said by the Niners that if they cannot work out Trent Williams' contract, that they're going to release him. He's under contract. The Niners are about $46 million. Latest tallies I'm seeing under the cap for this year. The cap has risen to a little over $301 million. So even with Trent Williams' nearly $39 million cap hit, the 49ers still have $46 million to work with under the cap when it comes to signing their own free agents, outside free agents, and when we get to the draft, end of April. Now, here are the numerical facts about the matter. If San Francisco does release Trent Williams, it will only be as a post-June 1st cap cut. And if that happens, the Niners will save $25.5 million on the cap, meaning Trent Williams would count a little over $13 million on the 2026 cap. Trent has a 2027 void year with a $28 million cap hit that will be there unless the Niners extend or restructure his contract. Then they can also move money around in the void year, I believe. But there's a looming, let's just clarify this further. There is a looming $28 million cap hit for Trent Williams right now in 2027, and he is not on the team in 2027. So in a way, it does behoove the Niners to rework Trent's contract because it can lower the cap hits not only for this year, but for 2027 as well. But now you are just kicking the can down the road to put that void year cap hit or multiple void year cap hits into the future. Trent Williams has a $10 million option bonus on March 20th, which is 9 days after free agency starts. So there is, in some ways, a deadline or a timetable. It's basically 3 weeks from today. I'm recording this on Saturday, February 28th. So there is a pseudo deadline that the teams can be, working towards. The funny thing about this is if the stance by Trent Williams and his agent is that he wants guarantees because his contract only has base salary remaining, San Francisco could say, well, we know we value you. You know we value you. We know how good you are. You know how good you are. Your base salary is going to get paid out. We want you on the team this year. Now, of course, the Niners can say that and renege and decide to cut him after June 1st and save $25.5 million in cap space. But remember, even if they release him in March or April or May, they don't get that $25.5 million in extra cap space until June 2nd. So it doesn't do them any good early on. But again, $46 million under the cap as of today. Both sides in this have leverage. Trent has leverage because he knows how good he is. Even at 38 years old, he knows what he means to the line, especially protecting Brock Purdy's blind side. And San Francisco has leverage because Trent is under contract and they can cut him for significant savings that they can get on June 2nd. Both sides have a pretty decent argument here. If this was 7 years ago and Trent was 31, maybe a little bit of a discussion, but the age is a factor when it comes to extending a player, even though still a top 3, top 5 tackle in the league. If you want to invest a substantial amount of money moving forward for an aging player. If you want to say declining, you can say declining. I mean, is he as dominant as he was 10 years ago? Probably close, but probably not. So mathematically, I guess that means that he is declining. But if declining still means top 5 tackle, you still have to think about, we want a top 5 tackle on our team. The math, the numbers are important. Now, would the 49ers be better with $25.5 extra million in salary cap space? Yes. But again, those savings are not realized until June 2nd if Trent Williams is a post-June 1st cap cut. If the worry is just guaranteed money, I don't know what the cap hit looks like if the Niners guaranteed some of his mid $20 million base salary. I don't know how that affects the cap for this year. I honestly don't. I apologize. I should, but I don't. It's going to be more than guaranteed money. Trent Williams is probably viewing himself in a lame duck year, but for San Francisco, there's also no harm in playing it out year to year, right? Like, let's see where you are at the end of this year. Then we can then the Niners would be in a bidding war with other teams for Trent Williams, but at some point they need to find an heir apparent. There needs to be a plan at left tackle, whether it's someone that gets drafted in the, second, third, fourth, fifth round this year, say second, third, or fourth, maybe fifth is a little late. But there is no plan. Austin Pleasance was re-signed as an exclusive rights free agent. He's the swing tackle, acquitted himself pretty decently when Williams missed a couple games. But there needs to be a succession plan. But again, San Francisco doesn't have to do anything. They can say, we're not doing anything. If you don't want to show up, then you forfeit your $24.5 million base salary. Or every week that you don't show up, you lose a little over $1 million, right? It's 25 million divided by 17 games, or maybe it's 18 with the bye week. I'm not sure. Both sides have a decent argument. I have no preference where this ends up, but I don't want the Niners to do anything financially that crushes them in future years. They only have $10 million in cap space next year. So an extension could help that with any cap from 2026 that rolls over into 2027. But in the rush to be first, social media people, you're rushing to look stupid. Take a breath, get the facts, and then if you want to post that, do it. But the golden rule of social media is never think before you post, because that's how you get engagement and negativity, of course. So now let's transition to the not hearing that the Niners, again, this is like social media nonsense, but let's talk through the absurdity of it. The Niners are open to trading Ricky Pearsall and Renardo Green. Huh? Why? Why create a problem at two different position groups when you don't need to? Yes, I can hear all the whiny 40 whiner fans complaining about Ricky Pearsall's injury history, which is really just a knee. Got shot his rookie year, which is wildly unfortunate. Thank God he survived. No long-term damage or repercussions. But the PCL, injured, came back too soon or came back and re-aggravated it again. I dare any of you to turn your ankle pretty significantly and come back right when you think you can maybe play basketball again and tell me you don't have a decent chance of re-injuring it, right? Common sense stuff. It sucked in a year that Juwan Jennings was dealing with injury, that Brandon Ayuk was a no-show for the team, where Jordan Watkins didn't get any playing time. Sky Moore wasn't anything other than a punt returner, and Demarcus Robinson was under middling. But Ricky Pearsall is one of the answers, not a problem. He's one of the answers at receiver. Like any player in any position group, assuming he stays healthy, but he's one of the answers that you're going to build around. Same with Renardo Green. People are putting so much ridiculous stock in the little spat or the yelling that Kyle did to Renardo Green during the Seahawk playoff game. Came out for, half a drive or a drive and went back in. Renardo Green is a good and capable number 2 corner in this league. Now, he played a lot of press man at Florida State, and he was drafted by a team that plays predominantly zone. So figure that out. Maybe he can play a little bit more man under Raheem Morris. But the Niners' top 3 quarterbacks, in my mind, are locked in for at least the next 2 years. In Demo, in Renardo Green, he's under contract for 2 more years, and Upton Stout. Darrell Luter is the only other only other legitimate cornerback under contract. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. Behind them, to me, it's you draft a corner in the mid-rounds, and you bring in a veteran free agent to round out your 6. And you have them compete with an undrafted rookie free agent or 2, with any of the other corners we're going to go over that are on the roster. But at most, they're going to carry 6 corners and possibly even 5. We'll get into that in a bit. John Lynch speaking at the Combine. Fans complaining that he didn't say anything of substance. He doesn't need to. Why would he? Anybody asked, well, what position are you targeting in the draft or free agency? You think he's going to say anything? I mean, here are the big takeaways. He acknowledged that Trent's age, 38 years old, is a factor in the negotiations, as it should be. If he was 34 years old, his age should be a factor in negotiations, being that big of a human being playing on the offensive line. Address the need to fix the pass rush. He didn't even need to address it. We all know that's the case. But you don't need to address and fix the pass rush solely with defensive ends. It's scheme. I was doing some research, and I'll have the data on a future podcast, but Brian Flores, the DC of the Minnesota Vikings the past handful of years, his defense has either amassed 48 or 49 sacks in each of the past 3 years. That includes 1 year with Danielle Hunter being the premier pass rusher at 16 and a half sacks. And the last 2 years not having him, they had a player that I think had 10 and a half 2 years ago, which I think might have been Jonathan Greenard. And last year, no one that hit the 10 sack mark, if I'm remembering this correctly. What the Vikings did have last year are 15 players with at least 1 sack. The Niners had 20 sacks in total. You don't have to rely on Justa Bosa or Huff or Michael or whoever the other defensive ends are. If you have a defensive scheme and philosophy that just doesn't rely on the front four, because when the front four is hurt and young, as it was last year, Zero pass rush. As good as Robert Saleh is as a DC, how disappointing, fans, think about this, is it that he could not figure out ways to manufacture a pass rush? I don't give a shit about pressures, but could not get the quarterback on the ground, per John Lynch's quote, because they're so wed to the rush 4 and cover with 7. I hope, if nothing else, Raheem Morris brings a new train of thought on, let's get to the quarterback with numbers. Let's get there with scheme. Let's get there with different looks and blitzes and stunts, whatever it might be. Fred Warner came out and said it. This whole rush 4 drop 7, it's worked well for them. Think of the championship games and Super Bowl appearances. But when the rush goes to shit like it did last season, your DC should have answers. Robert Saleh had none. Lynch was to be determined on how aggressive they'll be in free agency. Again, $46 million in cap space. What do you want him to say? Yeah, we're going to sign everybody under the sun. There's a cap. This isn't baseball. And even then, the Niners are not one big name, big price player away from a Super Bowl. There are needs throughout the roster at, probably 2 receiver spots, at left guard, on the defensive line. They only have 2 legitimate D tackles signed. At defensive end, they could use another linebacker, cornerback depth, a free safety. Fans that are upset that it's going to be another quiet free agency. The Niners aren't going to sign any players. They're going to sign players, morons, because they have to get to 90 fucking players for their training camp roster. They have 7 draft picks. They're going to re-sign a handful of their own free agents. They're going to sign a handful of outside free agents. It may not be this sexy, here comes Trey Hendrickson and Kyle Pitts and Mike Evans, and get your head out of your asses, folks. Not saying you guys, because I know I have smart people that are listening and watching, but the general fans and content creators out there are morons. You can't spend irresponsibly, because guess what? If the Niners spent irresponsibly on high-priced players that are over 30 years old, these same fans that are clamoring for these high-priced over 30-year-olds would be bitching the team out because they made bad signings, the players got hurt, didn't perform, or crushed their cap in future years. There needs to be some sort of financial responsibility, and it doesn't matter what any one of us think. I was totally on board for the plan this year. I kind of have an idea of what the plan is going to be this year. We're going to go over some of it in this podcast and the next 2 podcasts, which are going to go over potential outside free agents on offense and defense. But that dovetails into people running with the narrative that Debo and Greenlaw, if he gets released from the Broncos, and other players are coming back, because here's the quote that John Lynch said. Quote, he was talking about receivers here. Quote, we've got opportunities to improve ourselves by either bringing back some of the players that have been with us, or go finding new guys who fit, that want who we want to be and what we want to be, both in free agency and the draft. I butchered that a little bit. I apologize. Debo's coming back. If Greenlaw gets released, he's coming back. The remit is to get younger and faster and stronger and cheaper. Debo and Dre Greenlaw do not do that. Now, if Debo wants to come back on a 2-year, $10 million contract, I guess you think about it. But with only maybe 5 viable game day actives for receivers, do you want one of them to be a player who 2 years ago couldn't beat man? I'm not sure I do. And then it's going to be Kyle leaning on him with these bullshit handoffs and gimmick plays, which are just unnecessary. Dre Greenlaw can't stay healthy. Got signed by the Broncos, missed the first month and a half of the season. But yeah, let's bring him back. But sometimes it's time to move on. Just like Trent Williams. I could rationalize and be okay with if they move on from him, but I can rationalize and be okay with if they extend him in a responsible manner. The Niners don't need to go back to the well, right? They don't need to bring back any, fan favorite players. If they can do it at a very affordable rate, sure. But the Debo one is the one where, maybe it's just time that you go younger and much more dynamic and explosive. Plus, they still need a punt returner because Sky Moore is a free agent. You have to factor that into, I'm assuming, one of the wide receiver spots, or at least someone with that kind of ability. And Lynch speaking at the Combine, let's just talk about this quickly. I'm watching none of it. Am I seeing some people running 40s on Twitter and social media and the dialogue around that? Sure. But my God, the combine is so absurdly overblown in terms of how much someone's going to move up or down a draft board based on how much they bench press or 40-yard dash time, how high they can jump, how fast an offensive lineman is. When the fuck does that matter? When is an offensive lineman going to be moving or running as frantically as they are during a 40-yard dash? And these are athletes who are college athletes who are training specifically for these events. It is no one's going to be playing up to their time. It's rare that players play up to their time or how strong they are or their wingspan, hand size, height, weight. Ridiculous. And if you're really into watching 20-ish year old men run around in basically underwear, more power to you. I'm not going to judge, but the impact of 40 times and Niner content creators and fans. Oh, well, Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end from Oregon, ran a 4.4, so he's not going to be there at 27. He was never going to be there. He was never going to fall that far. And if he did, I don't think the Niners would draft him because Kyle makes tight ends irrelevant, or other tight ends, when George Kittle's on the field. Now, I can get behind another tight end in the mid rounds or later rounds or a free agent, especially if Jake Tonjes doesn't resign. But I think it would be irresponsible with the other more important needs on the roster to draft a tight end in the first round or even the second round. So let's transition to the defensive roster, guys. Again, this is me hopefully giving you guys the keys to free agency or a little bit of a cheat sheet in terms of what we are going to see from San Francisco, but it starts with what they already have. Let's go over that. The defensive line, let's start front to back. I think the Niners, when they break camp and they announce their 53-man roster, should have 10 defensive linemen on the roster. And here's why. I'm going to work backwards. They have 2 players on their roster that right now I'm considering tweeners. Not traditional DNs and certainly not D tackles. It's Keon White and it's Michael Williams coming off of the ACL. So if that's the case, if you have 2 players that are tweeners, then I would want 4 pure defensive ends and 4 pure defensive tackles. I'm not going to put so much on Michael Williams to expect that he's going to develop his pass rush arsenal significantly this offseason, especially when he's coming off of a torn ACL. Maybe there would have been, there would have been more growth if he didn't get hurt, right? Played the whole season, then you have this offseason to work on the craft. But this is setting him back. So I think so here's who's on the roster. Bosa, Huff, Michael Williams, William Bradley King, and Andrew Farmer have the build of defensive ends because they're not 290 plus pounds. Defensive tackles, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Evan Anderson, and Sebastian Valdez. Of those 4, only 2 are guaranteed to make the roster, and it's Alfred Collins and CJ West. Evan Anderson did start a bit 2 seasons ago, but he and Sebastian Valdez are on the practice squad for a reason. So I can see at least 1 veteran D tackle being brought in either to potentially start or compete for a roster spot, and they should be drafting 1 as well, in my opinion. Same with the defensive ends. They should be drafting a pure DN, none of this tweener shit, and bringing in a pure, and by pure, I mean like 6'3", 6'4", 250 to 265 in terms of weight. That can rush the edge. It has good bend, good speed, good get off on the snap versus a bigger body like Keon White, who's, I'm sure, a big, fast, explosive athlete, but not exactly even a Bryce Huff. Now, the free agents at D tackle, Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, and Kalia Davis. My prediction is if they extend the contract to any one of these defensive tackles, it's probably going to be Kalia Davis. He's the younger than Jordan Elliott by a year. Kalia Davis is 27. Jordan Elliott's 28. Kevin Givens, I know he had the injury. Was it the torn pec or whatever at the beginning of the season or training camp? Even when he was healthy, he was either a healthy scratch or inactive. So I think he's gone, and I think they could do better than Jordan Elliott, especially where I think he graded out in PFF rankings. If anyone is brought back, I would look for it to be Kalia Davis. And defensive end free agents, Clelin Ferrell, Samo, Robert Beal, and Taron Jackson. Taron Jackson was on IR from sometime in mid-camp. Robert Beal is just a guy. Those two are gone. And Yetur Gross-Matos, I think I skipped over. So it's Clelin Ferrell, Samo, Yetur, Robert Beal, and Taron Johnson. Yetur Gross-Matos is not, the Niners aren't going to re-sign him. His knee, however chronic or degenerative of a condition it is, arthritis, whatever it may be, I'm not speculating, but he does have an ongoing knee thing. You don't need to re-sign that type of player. So my prediction, I'm probably higher on Clelin Ferrell than most. I think Samo's a good player, but I think he's at 6 feet, 6'1", might not have the edge dimensions that Raheem Morris is looking for. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but I think my prediction would be they could easily sign both of these to close to vet minimum contracts with minimal to no guaranteed money and invite them in to compete. So I could see the Niners signing one or both as competition. And if Clelin Ferrell winds up being D-end 3 or 4 and they draft somebody and it's Bosa, Huff, a rookie, and Clelin Ferrell, I wouldn't be crushed. They could do better than Clelin Ferrell. They could also do worse. Now the goal is to do better than Clelin Ferrell in free agency. What is that going to cost? Is there anybody that Raheem Morris can bring over from Atlanta that's familiar in the system? Or how is he going to view the defensive end body type potentially differently than Robert Saleh did, wanting someone, bigger and more stout against the run? That's important. But 20 sacks sucked. And it's not just the players, like I mentioned earlier. It's got to be the scheme. It's got to be coming in waves. It's got to be generating pressure. So it's more than just expecting your D tackles to get a push and your DNs to get there. It's got to come from Upton, Stout, and corners and linebackers and potentially safeties as well. Now, linebackers, they're going to carry 5 or 6. They generally go 6, but I could argue 5 is not a problem, especially if you're keeping someone like a Jalen Graham and somebody else on the practice squad. But on the roster is Fred Warner, D. Winters, Tatum Bethune, Nick Martin, Jalen Graham, and Milo Eifler. Free agents are Eric Kendricks, Luke Gifford, Garrett Wallow, and Curtis Robinson. So John Lynch was also asked at the Combine, does he see a possibility of Eric Kendricks coming back and starting with Fred Warner? Now, Eric Kendricks looked pretty good at, 33, 34 at the end of the season with no wear and tear on the body. I don't know how Eric Kendricks would fare at this point in a full 17 games next to Fred Warner, covering tight ends or running backs out of the backfield beyond what we saw from the Philadelphia game and the Seattle game. And the Seattle game was obviously atrocious on every single level. I could see him maybe as a candidate for the practice squad, but I don't see him returning. Luke Gifford, special teams player, got leapfrogged by Garrett Wallow when he joined the team the last month and a half of the season. Ultimately, when Garrett Wallow was brought in for special teams as well, but in terms of playing time, it was Eric Kendricks and Wallow as the starters, and Luke Gifford was with the team the whole season last year. Couldn't sniff really a lot of playing time. And Curtis Robinson, the other free agent linebacker of the 4. So my prediction is either Garrett Wallow or Curtis Robinson comes back, because both of those players add value on special teams and have shown that as a linebacker 3 is maybe a little too high, but a linebacker 4 or 5 in spot starting duty, they hold up relatively well. Should the Niners bring in a draft pick or more than likely some sort of low-priced veteran free agent at linebacker? Yes, because the 4 players that are going to make the team are Fred Warner, D. Winters, Tatum Bethune, and Nick Martin. And hopefully Nick Martin, there is some sort of a sophomore jump for him to be viable. If he wins the spot over D. Winters, great. Bethune is more the backup for Fred Warner. They can do better than Tatum Bethune as a backup for Fred Warner. They could do worse also. And Jalen Graham and Milo Eifler are more kind of ticketed for the practice squad. But you have a second-year player in Martin, a third-year player in Bethune, a fourth-year player in Winters. It doesn't preclude them from bringing in a rookie, but maybe for your last roster spot or two at linebacker, maybe you go with players with some experience so you're not counting on youth the farther you get down the roster. Now, cornerbacks, again, 5 or 6 will make the final 53 6.5 months from now. But on the roster, it's Demo, Renardo Green, Upton Stout, Darrell Luter Jr., Eli Apple, Jacob Robinson, and Trey Tomlinson. So Eli Apple signed to a future contract. Jacob Robinson also future contract, was an undrafted rookie out of BYU. And Trey Tomlinson was someone that came over, I believe, from the Rams. I might have gotten that wrong, but didn't really play. And I think was put on IR for the whole season. The only 3 guaranteed to make the team are Demo, Renardo Green, and Upton Stout. Darrell Luter is in the last year of his rookie contract. Next to no cap implications if released. If a rookie, now to me, again, this is the same thing. Draft somebody mid-rounds, bring in a veteran free agent or two. And I'm sure, again, there's going to be an undrafted rookie free agent corner in the mix again for the 90-man roster. Free agents, it's only Chase Lucas, and he was Upton Stout's backup at nickel. He's a restricted free agent. If they tender him, it's at least $3 million for 1 year. That's too much to spend on a backup nickel. You can't be spending 3 times as much on your backup nickel as your starting nickel. Could they resign him to something a little bit more affordable? Maybe half that? Multi-year? Sure, but this again is an opportunity to maybe get cheaper and younger in either the draft or free agency, or they understand that Demo is the backup to Upton Stout. So if Stout gets hurt, Demo slides to nickel and someone else winds up becoming your outside corner, and maybe that cornerback isn't on the roster currently. But my prediction is that Chase Lucas is going to sign elsewhere. Safeties, 3 or 4. I'll get to the why it could be 3 in a moment. But on the roster, Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown, Marquise Siegel, Ciaran Neal, Derek Canteen, and Derek Forrest. Last 2, Derek or Derek's, are going to be practice squad at best. Ciaran Neal can play safety or cornerback. So if you go with 5 pure corners and Ciaran Neal is your 6th, you might not need a 4th safety because he could be safety number 4. But the Niners are going to have a need at safety that should be addressed relatively early in the draft, either say round 2 or 3. Could be round 1, depending on who's either there or not there for San Francisco at pick 27 if they stay there. Or in free agency. Not a huge swing, not a break-the-bank swing at free safety, but they need someone who can be a center fielder. It's certainly not Malik Mustafa. It's not Jair Brown, and it's probably not Marquise Siegel as well. I don't think any one of those 3 players are not on the roster next year. Of those, if they wind up bringing someone in free agency and drafting someone, could I see Jair Brown getting traded? Sure. I don't think that would happen before the draft, probably after, maybe sometime in camp when you're getting down to cut downs. If a team doesn't want to lose out on potentially signing Jair Brown, although I don't, he's not that great. So what's the loss? But getting a 6th or 7th round pick for him, at least it's something. The only free agent at safety is Jason Pinnock. He's gone. Now he played, the big nickel for them. Okay. But he is not a must bring back by any means. So I don't see anybody. He's the only free agent at safety. He's not going to be coming back. The Niners will be looking certainly in free agency for some help, but hopefully the draft as well to get younger, since you have Jair Brown on the last year of his contract, if he's on the team in 2026. And lastly, special teams. So we found out that long snapper John Weeks re-signed. keeps the average age maybe a little higher than it should be since he's 40 or close to it. Eddie Piñeiro, there were some reports that the Niners offered him $3.5 million on a multi-year 2 or 3 year deal. Piñeiro wants to play out free agency. $5 million annually is the market for a top 10 kicker, and he is a top 10 kicker. You could argue where in the top 10. I really don't care. And Thomas Morstead at punter could come back. I don't know if he's going to retire or if he retired and I missed it. But I think you could bring in another punter on a vet minimum 1 or 2 year deal. Don't go to the draft. Get someone proven. You don't have to, certainly you're not breaking the bank on a punter, or you shouldn't be spending, more than 3 or 2 times, maybe a vet minimum on a punter. Now, my prediction is that Eddie Piñeiro eventually resigns. I don't think this is going to be something that Kyle Shanahan's going to be pounding the table for Eddie Piñeiro, but they saw the struggles with Jake Moody. They saw how the struggles were basically alleviated by Eddie Piñeiro. That doesn't mean that they can't find a comparable kicker in free agency. Do not go the draft route. It didn't work. The sample size is 1 in Jake Moody. Didn't work. If they let Piñeiro walk and you could sign, a cheaper free agent kicker and bring in an undrafted rookie free agent, have them battle it out. You don't need to spend a draft pick on a punter or a kicker. But I think when the dust settles, Eddie Piñeiro resigns. It's probably going to be closer to $5 million annually than the $3.5 million that the Niners reportedly offered. But the kicking woes that the Niners had with Jake Moody, I don't think anyone, fans or members of the organization, want to revisit. It doesn't mean they can't find a quality kicker beyond Eddie Piñeiro, but you know what you have in Eddie. It's just a matter of, are you willing to pay what he is looking to make? So that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening or viewing routine. This was the defensive side of the football breakdown. Last week was the offensive side breakdown, who's on the roster and Niner free agents. As we pivot into next week and are getting close to the legal tampering period, which I believe starts on March 8th or 9th, with free agency kicking off on March 11th. In a couple of days from now, we're going to be going over potential offensive free agents, outside free agents the Niners could be looking for or targeting per position. And a couple of days after that, we'll do the same exercise on the defensive side of the ball. And not in between, but in each podcast between now and then, I'm going to more crystallize my POV on what the Niners' approach to outside free agency should be, and then obviously who they could be targeting at each position on both sides of the ball in 2 separate podcasts coming up. Could be midweek this week and then early next week, leading us right into free agency. So whatever you guys are doing between now and when we speak again, stay happy, healthy, and safe. We will talk soon, faithful. Take care.